Well, I don't know how you define summer, but I think it's like officially summer. Anybody? Some of you are like, no, I'm not in school anymore. Well, because I am a dad of school-age children, when they finish Friday, and it's like my stuff doesn't change for summer, but it just feels like less routine. They can stay up, which I don't know what I'll do with the time I used to spend when they were in bed, but welcome to summer, and next week we're actually kicking off our summer series here at Epic. Inside your program, we know that God makes all types of people, so we've given you 2 different sized invite cards in your program. This is what we're after really for the whole summer. You know, it's a phrase we throw around a lot, especially if you've been in church, including this one. It's like, hey, this is about following Jesus. We're followers of Jesus. If you had an informational kind of survey, you would check, I'm a follower of Jesus. But what does that really even mean? What are the distinctives of that? What does it look like to embrace that if we're going to say we're followers of His? What needs to be true and present in our lives? And let me just say this. I think it's going to be a full summer series. Next week, though, is crucial. So if make plans to be here if you can. If not, get the podcast or whatever. It's been a message from God to my own heart over the last couple of months that has been transformative for me. This idea that there's something that I've got to get to a place of understanding before I can really follow and even do the things I think Jesus asks us to do. It's this fundamental thing. And so I'd love for you to be here next week if you can at all. But today we are wrapping up and finishing out our One Life series. I know for you, maybe like me, you thought this day would never come. It's a 10-week series that we inserted a 4-week series in the midst of, and so we are literally going to end this today. This has been a series, if first time here, no problem, we'll catch you up, and the message will stand alone within the series, but this has been a series based around the life of Moses, the big idea being that God has a purpose for our lives, and so we began to look at Moses' story and think, what can we learn about our own purpose in life? Here are a few things that we felt like God gave to us in this series. The first one is this: whatever purpose you have for your life, it originates in the heart of God. You and I don't have to dream up a purpose. We don't have to go achieve a purpose. It originates in the heart of God. And then as we begin to follow Him and begin to seek Him in His perfect timing, He downloads those purposes or that purpose to our hearts. But as we begin to journey and pursue that purpose, we need God, and we need to depend on God to help us accomplish it. We said that a purpose that God would have us pursue would never be centered around us, nor would it be about something that we could handle or accomplish on our own, that we actually need His help. And as Will said so eloquently last week, we need His presence. And guys, if you weren't here last week, let me encourage you, Will did a great job teaching that. It wasn't my message, so I can talk about it in the positive all I want to. He did a great job, but the essence of his message is this: whatever we pursue, wherever we go directionally, relationally, vocationally, let's make sure we're going where God is leading us so we don't find ourselves getting to a place and God not being present with us because we've chosen to disobey. We've chosen His path is this way. Instead, we walk that way. Today, what I want to do is this: really talk about this idea that we only have one life to accomplish the mission and purpose that God has given us. I really want to speak to the sobering reality that every single one of our earthly lives in this room is going to come to an end one day. Anybody feel encouraged yet? This isn't one of those things that we love to talk about. In fact, I don't talk about that much here. But I want us to begin thinking about this today. In light of our purpose, is it possible to live out our purpose in such a way that it goes on beyond our one life? Is it possible to live in such a way to give our time and our efforts and our love away to the world in such a way that our purpose lives on beyond the date of our death? Can we do that? And does Moses do that? Well, you may say, of course, we're talking about him in 2014. I would say that he has a purpose that outlived his life. And so I want to do that, but I want to really get us going with this question this morning. Here it is. What kinds of future regrets are you currently creating with your life? What kinds of future regrets are you currently creating with your life? We had a staff retreat at the beginning of this week, and I began just to ask the staff a question that I've been asking myself lately. So most of the staff, we moved here 4 years ago this past week. No amens, thanks. No, like, we're so glad, Ben. But here was the exercise. I said to them and to myself, hey, what would we say to ourselves from 4 years ago? And you know what some of those things were that maybe I think I want to say to us today, and even as we begin the series next week? Relax a little more. The stuff that 4 years ago you thought were life and death things just aren't. They're important. They're just not life or death. And I would have spent my time maybe in a little different way, probably enjoying it more. And so as you and I think about the trajectory of our lives currently, where we're headed, and how we allocate time and attention, the words we speak that bring life to people and bring death to people, what sort of future regrets are we currently creating? So I want us to think about that as we jump into this situation. Moses' life, just like all of ours will one day, Moses' life eventually came to its conclusion, just like ours will. And what I want to ask about Moses is, does he have anything to do with what happens in the world once he has finished his days on earth? Does he have anything to do with what happens to the world? And here's my premise. I'll go ahead and give it to you. If we aren't impacting anyone but ourselves during our time on earth, we would be foolish to think that our impact will outlive us. If we are self-obsessed with our purpose during our time on earth and have no room to see, listen, or speak into other purposes of other people, then my assumption I'll give you on the front end is that our life will not be able to outlive us, because if it was focused on us and we're gone, guess what? Everything that it tried to accomplish and aimed at is no longer in present. But could Moses live in such a way? What I want to do is take you to Joshua chapter 1. It's the sixth book in the Old Testament. If you need a Bible, raise your hand. Our team is already on it. We are well equipped to hand you a Bible. Keep your hands up. You can follow along. Joshua chapter 1 for the rest of us. Again, it goes Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Joshua chapter 1, page 115 in the Bibles that we've passed out this morning. And it's so fun to see everybody back. This is great. I don't know what, you guys had fun last week, Memorial Day? Everybody had a good time? Anybody participate in Beta Breakers the week before that? Anybody go out of town for Mother's Day the week before that? Our staff loves the month of May. It does a lot for our insecurities as a staff when it comes to attendance. But we've had a great May, and we're just glad you guys are back for June. So stand up with me. Let's read Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 through 9. It's a lot of babies on the way this summer at Epic. I know some of you are going on some fun trips. We've got mission trips. I really think by the time we get to September, there will have been 10 or 12 babies born in our church. So you got to go to the church one way or the other. So men, women, way to go for it. Joshua 1, 1 through 9. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant, is dead. So this text comes right on the heels of his death. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea, toward the going down of the sun, shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened, and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. You may be seated. We can bring in more chairs, and the artist circle seats are still wide open, okay? Just for whoever's looking for, a little upgrade. You ever been at the Giants game? They have the StubHub upgrade moment. These are those seats, right? If you've ever wanted nothing between us. Summer. It is summer. A very inspirational message that God gives to Joshua, wouldn't you agree? I mean, we've been talking about purpose, and the last couple of weeks we've talked about presence, and God gives him this amazing purpose. Joshua, you will be the one. When God freed his people from slavery in Egypt, he knew that it wasn't just to remove them from Egypt, but it was to take them into the land of Canaan, the promised land. And now Joshua is being told by God, this is your new purpose. And not only is this your purpose, but he begins to promise presence with Joshua. I will be with you. You don't have to be afraid. Why? Because I'm there. I will go with you. I will not leave you. I will not forsake you. Super inspirational, right, for Joshua. But wait a minute, this hasn't been a series about Joshua, right? This has been a series about Moses. What's my problem? What I want to do is work our way back a little bit and let you see what Moses, if anything, had to do with the purpose of God being lived out in the life of Joshua. And then I want us to begin to think, is there anything that my purpose in my life has to do with someone else's purpose from God being lived out during their time on earth, both while I'm alive with them and perhaps even when they should live on after me? So that's what I want to look at this morning. Now, there came a time in which Moses came to the understanding that he would not be the one who would lead the Israelites into the promised land. You can imagine a very disappointing day. In fact, in Deuteronomy, it's just one book before Joshua. It'll also be on the screen. Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 37 and 38. Here's what Moses says to the Israelites about what God had said to him. Listen up, and then I just want you to think about what happens when our purpose isn't what we want it to be, and God hands it actually to someone else. How can we understand and live that out? Here's what happens. Deuteronomy chapter 1, 37 and 38. Moses speaking to the Israelite nation. Even with me, the Lord was angry on your account and said, you also shall not go in there. Joshua the son of Nun, who stands before you, he shall enter. Encourage him, for he shall cause Israel to inherit it. Moses is told by God, you will not lead my people to the ultimate destination that I've planned for them since the very beginning. From before I ever came down to rescue you from Pharaoh, this is the point of place that I had in mind. This was the ultimate destination. This is where I wanted to lead you to, but Moses, you won't be the one. Moses had done some amazing things for God, but he didn't always get it perfect. Sound familiar? Some of you are like, Ben, I would love to get it right once. There came a point along the journey, and you can read this for yourself throughout Exodus, but there came a point along the journey where Moses allowed his anger to get the best of him. And in his anger, he chose to outright disobey God. And there are consequences to our sin, right? There's grace, there's forgiveness, and yet our sin still has consequences. And the consequence for Moses' sin and his disobedience, God's determination would be that he would not be the one who would lead Israel into the promised land. And it wasn't the kind of thing like, Moses, you're still going to go, someone else will lead. It's like, Moses, you won't step foot into the promised land. And not only that, Moses, but your assistant's the one that I've chosen and given this new purpose to. But not just that, Moses, you're not going. Joshua is going, and by the way, I want you to be his encourager. So can you imagine that you've started a company or you've been with a company or some sort of endeavor, maybe a leadership position in a church from the very beginning, and all of a sudden the leader, the boss comes to you and they say this, hey, we're still headed. Our vision's still the same. We're still going in the direction we said we were going whenever you came onto this assignment, but you're no longer going to have a part in it. Some of you, that's not hard to imagine because you've been in those roles before. Not only are you not going to have a part in it, but your assistant's going to take your place. And everybody's cheering for their assistant, right? Come on, show me how. You'd be like, yay, I'm so happy. Not only are you not going, not only is your assistant the one going, but you're going to be the one to encourage your assistant moving forward. And I know all of you have no pride and ego issues like your pastor, and so you're like, easy, done. How would you respond? Moses, the destination's still the same, but you're not going. Joshua is, and I want you to speak words of encouragement to him. Could Moses do this? Could I do this? Could you do this? I want you to see Deuteronomy chapter 31, verses 7 and 8 to see if Moses could carry this kind of thing out. Deuteronomy 31, 7 and 8. Here's a conversation that Moses has with Joshua. Then Moses summoned Joshua and said to him in the sight of all Israel. These are Moses' words to Joshua. Be strong and courageous, for you shall go with this people into the land that the Lord has sworn to their fathers to give them, and you shall put them in possession of it. It is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. All of you could have done that in Moses' situation, right? I could have done that, right? Surely in Moses' situation. I want you to think about it. Remember, when we read Joshua chapter 1 a second ago, it said after the what? After the death of Moses, Joshua heard these words from the Lord. This is crazy to me. It's not the first time Joshua heard these words. It's not the first time Joshua heard the echo of be strong and courageous. We know that it happened before because when Joshua's story begins, it tells us that after the death of Moses, Joshua heard this from the mouthpiece of God. But before he ever heard it from God, he heard it from a man whose intended destination was the one that's just been handed to Joshua. It's incredible that he's able to pass the leadership baton. As someone mentioned to me after the first service, this may have been the first succession plan we have in history. And typically what happens when you hand over something you've been leading for a long time, usually it's for retirement, not always death. Usually when you hand something over, you're just hopeful that they'll keep the thing going and remember you and keep your face on a plaque somewhere where future employees know who you are. Moses isn't retiring. Moses, A, has been relieved of his job. B, is about to die. Not only that, but he's not saying to Joshua, Joshua, I want you to keep this thing going at 80% of how I was leading. No, the word to Joshua is Moses tells him, Joshua, you're going to possess the land. You're going to do the thing that I never was able to do. And I think as we've said in this series, I think what Moses does is he reminds Joshua that the purpose God has given him originates in God. And then he speaks amazing confidence into the heart of Joshua. And so that when God says that to him, I think what we just read in Joshua chapter 1, that's resonating within him because he's heard it. God's used Moses to say it. And Moses did what many of us wouldn't have the humility to do, what many of us wouldn't have the servant-hearted spirit enough to do, what many of us would, because of our jealousy and envy, we would march out and we'd be like, fine, if he wants to do it, fine, but I'm having nothing to do with it. Not Moses. Not Moses. Moses had a choice to make, and it's a similar one that you and I have. Moses had to decide this: would his purpose end with him that God had given him, or could it go on beyond him? Not just after his life, but in the midst of his life. Would his purpose be contained within his own heart, or could his purpose from God be about more than just him? When it comes to your purpose, can it go on beyond you, or is it really just about our own self-absorption and our self-obsession about what we have to do and what we want to do and what we've got to take care of and what we have to produce and what we have to accomplish? Or is there room, as you pursue your purpose, is there room for the purpose of other people to be in the mix? Listen, I get that we are super interested in knowing what God has for our purpose. That's why we've been at this forever, it seems like. That's why we've done a 10-week purpose series. I want us to wake up to whatever God's created us. One of my things that God impressed upon my heart years ago is that whatever he puts in us, he wants to bring out of us. It's one of our values here at Epic. So I want to see things awaken within you. The conversations that have been happening, it's just been an interesting time over the last few months. But our purpose, as we pursue it from God, it can't just be about what our thing is, right? Friends, we need to, as Moses did in an amazing way, we need to be able to step off the pedestal, step off of our own platform, allow someone else to have their platform, even if it's replacing us, and we need to applaud them, and we need to encourage them, and we need to say, hey, I hope that you do more things, or God does more things through you than he'll ever do through my own life. It's not about saying, oh, this depression kind of thing, like, oh, poor me. So let me just give you a few examples. Any of you in this room who are involved in our small group leadership here at Epic, you have an hour to 2 hours every week, not just to get through some questions and talk about how awesome the message was on Sunday, okay? Not just, I said. I didn't say don't do it, not just. Seriously, though, you have an hour to 2 hours every week to sit in a circle in a living room or some other room or some coffee shop with people and to speak the purposes of God into their lives, to tell them what their boss isn't telling them that you believe in, and to tell them that what maybe their parents didn't tell them, that you actually believe that God's got this great purpose. You see a gift rising up in them and you see a potential future. Now, don't lie to them, okay? That's really weird. Right? Don't just, this is not like empty encouragement. Right? Like, oh, you're going to be the best ever, and your fingers are crossed behind your back. Okay, that's terrible leadership. For those of you that work in any area of our Epic Kids ministries, you get an hour a week, not just to feel good about doing your service for the week. You get 1 hour a week, no matter what voices those kids are hearing at school, no matter what voices those kids are hearing from their own moms and dads or relatives that don't care for them, like maybe they should care for them. You get 1 hour to be the voice speaking the purpose of God and the love of God and the grace of God into their lives. This is a big deal. Every single one of us are having coffee with people every week. We're having lunches with people every week. We work with people, we work for people, and people work for us. And we're face to face with them every week, and we have an opportunity to speak God's purposes into their lives. How are we doing with it? Something that's convicting for me and perhaps you too. Guys, whenever we call our parents to tell them how exciting our lives are in San Francisco, are any of us asking what God's doing in their life back home? When your kids come home to you and you are multitasking, you're trying to hear about how great kindergarten was that day, or maybe this is just me, and yet you're thinking about, oh, we have all of these issues to take care of in the church and my work, and I can't think straight. Can we be interested in someone else's thing besides our own? Can we get to that place where we actually care about people? In some profound way, I've seen this Moses-Joshua thing lived out. And in the Midwest, there's a pastor named John Marshall, and he's been a pastor at a pretty large church there for about 16 years. In his first 10 years or so of his pastorate there at that church in the Midwest, the church grew from 900 to about 2,700 people. So the guy tripled the church, and they wanted to continue doing great ministry. And so what they did is they decided they needed to change some things up so that they could reach more young people and so that they could reach young families. And so in what I thought it was, when I heard about it, was a great act of humility. That pastor who had been so successful there was willing to bring in a 31-year-old younger teaching pastor, and that guy gave up the 11 o'clock platform for this young teaching pastor to be able to lead that congregation. I don't know that I would have that humility. I don't know that I could step aside and do that. I want to be able to do that. So this guy steps aside. This pastor, John, he's 56 at the time. He starts preaching the 8 o'clock and 9:30 service, and then he lets this 31-year-old guy start teaching the 11 o'clock service, like the prime hour in most places, right? He gives up the main room, and he just sits on the second row and encourages and never gets stage time and just listens in. This is a church that he essentially grew 3 times the size it was when he got there. Incredible humility. Oh, what's crazier than that is about just a few months after this 31-year-old guy started, he goes to John and says to him, hey, this sounds crazy. I didn't know this was coming, but I feel like God's impressing upon my heart to start a church in downtown San Francisco. What he should have done to that 31-year-old guy is fired him, kicked him to the curb, and said, we've invested way too much time into this. You can't be leaving. Instead, he said to that 31-year-old, the way I see it, you've got 500 days between today and the day that you move, and I'm going to do something every day to influence that. Today, that guy serves on the board of directors for this thing called Epic Church in downtown San Francisco. Yesterday, I sent him a text just to say thank you. Say thank you. I said, thank you for stepping off the platform so I could have it at 11 o'clock. I said, thank you. When I told you, you should have fired me, but you didn't. Instead, you blessed and influenced this church. If you want to know part of why God's favor has been over our church, I think it's linked to this one man in some ways. It's generational stuff. Imagine, you've been there over 10 years. It grew under your leadership. You step aside. The guy you hired now says he wants to go do this crazy thing out west. And so I sent him a text message thanking him. And let me tell you what people who are like what he's already done that I've told you about, they just can't help themselves. So I send him all this, like just pouring my heart out, thanks, just want him to say you're welcome. Instead, he says, no, Ben, the blessing's been mine. Oh, come on, man. Like those people just can't help themselves. It's always about the other people, and in a serious way, will I ever get there? Where I can take a seat, let somebody take my place, or one of my kids see God do more in their lives than I've ever seen him do in mine, and can I really applaud it with no attention, with no focus? Can you? Is there space in your purpose and in my purpose for other people? Let me ask it this way, it'll be on the screen. Are you living the kind of life that will outlive you? If it only involves you during your lifetime, just know that the day you breathe your last breath, your purpose and its effects thereafter will not have anything to do beyond that date. We get so consumed going after our thing, making sure we're known in our industry or in the church world or whatever the case may be. Let me give you this thing that I'm trying to embrace myself. I never know if that's God speaking or just the first floor moving their stuff out. In the end, it won't matter nearly as much what we're known for as it will the actual impact we have with our lives. In the end, what we end up being known for, I think this is on the screen, what we end up being known for won't be nearly as important as the actual impact we make with our lives. It could be possible that you can make impact and you actually get known for that, but many of us in this room, you will have to make a decision. I will have to make a decision. Do you care most about the impact you can make, especially as it relates to others, or do you care, like just being honest with yourself this morning, you don't have to tell your spouse yet, okay? Are you okay making impact if it means you won't be known? Because what we have to remember, and this is why we started this church in this city, this is why we continue to talk about orienting our lives around Jesus, the kingdom of the world is different than the kingdom of Jesus. I'm going to just give you 3 ways what we're talking about today. Here's how it's different. In the kingdom of the world, everything centers around us. You guys know our vision here is to center or orient our lives around Jesus. In the kingdom of this world, we continually ask, what can we get? What can we get? What can we receive? In the kingdom of Jesus, the leading question, if we get it right, at least in a transformative way, is, what can we give? And then here's the big one to me. In the kingdom of this world, when it comes to our purpose, we step on whoever and we do whatever we have to do so that we can get the thing that we're after. In the kingdom of Jesus, we don't step on people to get what we want. We lay our lives down so they can get what they want. Is this really the man you want to follow? Not on paper. Reality. Laying down your life, laying down my life. And what we know is that a life of self-absorption and self-obsession won't get us there. And what I'm convinced of is that the number one thing that will keep us from living out God's purposes is continually thinking we've got to have all of our energy and effort and focus and attention on ourselves. It's the thing that will determine whether or not your purpose goes on beyond you. It's not easy. In a positive way, we start thinking about how we can do great things. Then we start thinking negative thoughts about ourselves. And either way, positively or negatively, you and I become consumed with ourselves. And when we're consumed with ourselves, there's no space, not for our spouse, not for our kids, not for people we're serving in the church, not for our neighbors, not for our coworkers. Why? Because if I don't get mine, then bad things happen. And so we make sure that we get ours. But Jesus has come to free us from that. He's come to give us a different way, I think a better way. And it's not easy, but I think it's worth the pursuit. I really do think it's worth the pursuit. Because here's the thing, Moses was given a grand purpose by God, right? It's not that you have to set down your purpose for the others to go forward. God still has a thing for you. I've been talking about that the last 9 weeks. But there may be some things you and I have to set aside so that people can pursue theirs. God's given you a great purpose, but let that purpose include other people. I think we would at least mostly agree that Jesus was given the most robust mission and purpose ever in the history of the world. All right? I'm just going to assume we're all on page with that. If not, we don't have the space for that argument. Not today. And yet he embodies this thing we've been talking about all day in an amazing way. In fact, the words that John, the beloved disciple, uses to talk about, he recorded Jesus saying these things, it's almost like I want to argue with Jesus, okay? It's almost like he's saying something that is just, you may, if someone said to you, like, man, you really need some help, okay? Now listen to what he says. It'll be on the screen. John 14, 12 through 14. He just gets crazier and crazier as this thing goes on. Truly, truly, this is Jesus talking to his disciples. I say to you, whoever believes in me will also do the works that I do. Yeah, right. He goes on. It gets a little crazier. And greater works than these will he do because I am going to the Father. Keep it going. Whatever you ask in my name, this I will do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask me anything in my name, I will do it. Jesus says, you're going to do the kinds of things that I'm doing. In fact, you're going to do more and greater things than what I've been doing. Now, before you go getting all big-headed, okay, in 13 and 14, he actually says he'll be the one doing it through you, but nonetheless, right? This I will do, he says. You pray it, I will do it, though. Not you will do it, I will do it. I will do it in the Father, glorifying the Father. I will do it. I will be the one who's doing it. And I'm just like, again, we could say this is obvious, but Jesus made sure that his impact was in such a way that it was going to long outlive his life, even in those followers, even if we didn't have the Bible, even if there was no Easter. He made sure that he was impacting those in such a way. He said that they would do even greater things. Now, part of it was because he was going to the Father and would empower them through his Spirit. But what's crazy to me, Jesus says this to people who haven't proven themselves, right? Like, I'll step aside if you can show me you're good enough. Not Jesus. He hands it to people who acted like he didn't exist. Jesus hands it to people who are cutting off other people's ears, right? Jesus hands it to people who want to know if they get the main seat in honor, completely contrary to what his kingdom was all about. And yet Jesus says to these ones, you're going to do the kinds of things that I was not doing. You're going to do even greater things, even greater things. So here's the reality. You and I only have one life. And what you and I do with it, friends, really, really, really matters. In a full room like this, there's no doubt some of us are at crossroads when it comes to careers and relationships. What my guess is that most of us are at a crossroads with whether or not we're really going to live for ourselves or really lay down our lives and surrender to what Jesus wants to do in our lives. It's not a one and done thing ever, right? It's not like, we enter a relationship with Jesus and we surrender this first time. For those of us who have been Christians for a while, it's this constant thing. It's things surface and we go again, like, will I surrender or will I live for myself? We have a value here at Epic that says we want to leverage the temporary for the sake of the eternal. When we speak that value, what we're usually referencing our time. We're usually referencing our time, our focus, our money, our resources. But I want you to really think about your purpose today. Your purpose is temporary. The reason I know that is because your life is temporary. In fact, every time in the scriptures where it's spoken of my life and your life, again, you're ready to be depressed, I know. It never alludes to the fact that it's going to be a long thing. Every time life is referenced in the scriptures talking about the human life and the lifespan, even if you go a long time, it's in reference, it's always really, really short. It's like a mist. It's like a breath. It's like the flowers. It's like the grass. All of those things are really short-lived, and you know that. In the grand scheme of things, our lives are but a blip, but what we do with them really, really matter. Really, really matter. And one thing I'm becoming convinced of, and I haven't embraced this nearly as consistently as I would like, but I'm becoming convinced that who we become will be more important than what we do, than how we're known, and than what we accomplish. Why, Ben? Does Jesus care about what we do? Absolutely. But he knows the way he created the world, if we become the right kinds of people, then we will be the right kinds of people doing the right kinds of things. And if we become the right people doing the right kinds of things, then we will include others and we will be speaking purpose and confidence into their lives. I want to ask you this sincerely. Here's some homework for this week. What meeting do you need to pursue? What letter, handwritten, yes, do you need to write? What phone call do you need to make? Who do you need to sit across from a table from this week or the next time you have the chance to see them this summer and say to them, I believe God's going to do great things in your life? Can you and I go to these meetings not consumed with how they're going to encourage us, though it would be great if they do, but can we just go into these situations? And if you lead anything, if you're a high-powered leader, like according to the world, awesome, this includes you. But if you lead anyone in anything, you lead kids, you lead grandkids, you whatever, volunteer organizations, you must, as a leader, this was what makes you a leader. Remember, leaders lay down their lives for the sake of those who follow them. And part of that must be stepping aside and saying to them, I believe God's going to do something great in your life. For us moms and dads, this is a conversation with our children we should initiate weekly. Some of us are so obsessed with where we're going in our lives, we honestly don't have the time to care about where our kids are going. It's just reality. Some of you, us in this church, you can be on staff, you can be one of our 300 volunteers, one of our core small group leaders, whatever the case may be. You can be a leader on paper and still be so consumed with yourself that there's no space for others to have confidence spoken into them from you, no space for others to have their purpose encouraged, and we need to be people who live not just for ourselves. We need to live for Christ and live for the people that he's put around us. Who do you need to speak into this week? Who needs to hear it from you? You're like, I think they know. Tell them. What did it do for Joshua when this great leader that he's been following like this the whole time, when this great leader turns around to him and says, God's going to be with you. You can do this. I'm not going to be around, but you can do this. God is going to be with you every place you step your foot. And remember, the whole way we get into a relationship with Jesus is because he embodies this, right? He embodies this. He lays down his life, the scriptures say, so that we might find life. Out of his death, we gain life. But then he says to his followers, which I know many of us claim to be that in the room this morning, he says this: if you want to save your life, what do you need to do? You need to lose it. Oxymoron, yes. Paradoxical, certainly. But if we want to save and hang on to the life that's really life, we need to lose the kingdom of this world life we've been holding on to if we're going to enter the kingdom and remain in the kingdom that Jesus has brought us into. Would you pray with me this morning? Our band's going to come up and play a song I think is just the perfect one. I know for me, thinking about these thoughts, working on this throughout the week, thinking about delivering it yesterday, two things are true about me and many of you perhaps. I really want to be this kind of person. I genuinely believe that's an honest desire, and I'm sure that many of us in this room, but what I know is that there will be things happen even today where I will have to make a decision. Is it about my pride? Is it about my ego? Is it about how people think I appear to them? Or can I find my identity rooted in Christ? And then as I follow him, can I become the kind of guy, the kind of husband, the kind of dad, the kind of pastor, the kind of friend that lays down my life and everything being around me, make it around Jesus and invite others and speak life and confidence into them? If you don't know the life that Jesus has offered you in this whole thing we're talking about, I just want you to know that he set aside heaven to come to earth. He didn't trample on anyone to prove himself better than you. He laid his life down for you. The way that Paul writes it in a couple of the epistles, he says that Jesus Christ loved us and gave himself up for us. And this is the model we are to follow. God, would you help us? God, would you help us? Jesus, you said we would do greater things than you, but then you said that you would do it. Will you do it in us? Will you make us the kind of people we can't become on our own? Would we be willing to surrender? Would we be willing to sacrifice for your sake and the sake of others? God, what if that was unleashed in this church? What if that was unleashed in our city, God? I pray that you would allow us to be participants and citizens in your kingdom, following you in the way of laying down our lives for the sake and purpose of others. In your name, amen. Would you stand with me? And perhaps a song.